and figure out how we individually handle change to be able to be effective in our jobs, whether it's being a change agent, being a leader, or even being someone who just is affected by the change and how we embrace that change and move forward. So we're going to talk a little bit about the self-reflection opportunities that we have through any change that is presented to us in our lives. This is a quote that I love a lot. Many times when we're developing something new or something is being developed that is new, we think that it has to be perfect before we launch it. And I can guarantee you that if that was really the case, nothing would ever change. There would be no improvement at all. And you would still be walking around because the wheel never would have been invented. So everything that came from that came from some of the Industrial Revolution. Those other type of things never would have happened because we would have been so worried about developing something that was perfect right out of the gate rather than getting something off the ground and being able to work through the improvements that come through change and that continuous improvement impact. So we need to make sure that we understand that it's never going to be perfect, partly because we have imperfect people designing an imperfect process. So therefore, we're never going to have anything that's perfect that gets rolled out. But what we need to do is try to make the best educated decisions at that moment in time based on the information we have. Some people call that forecasting. Some people call that guessing. But nonetheless, we have to use everything we've got to be able to develop what we can at the time and then implement the change and refine that as we go down the path of whatever it is that's being changed. So don't have the expectation that it's going to be perfect right out of the gate. The other thing that we're doing is we're redefining category management within Intermountain Supply Chain. So this is the first of two series that I have with the category management team that will help them understand the importance of that. And I put this down here that's extremely important. Anytime people hear about change at work, first thing they think, uh-oh, people are getting laid off. Okay. So I want you, if you are involved in any type of change and it's change to improve the department or to improve a process, you have to make sure people understand that they're not going to lose their job if they're really not going to lose their job. Because if you don't address that right up front in today's environment, they will always have that stick in the back of their heads and they won't become fully committed to it. So if this is something that, in this case, we're changing category management, we're redefining roles and we're updating roles, we had to make sure that people understood that no one was going to lose their job. Otherwise, we would not have been able to have a productive discussion in how we wanted to improve category management. So just kind of think of that when you hear change or when you're leading change, make sure you help them understand the why. It's extremely important. And help set that vision within that why. What is it that you're trying to create that is new? Or what do you want to refine of something that is currently a process, and how do you want to make that better? So that will help them. So you've got situations and objectives that come through with change management that we have to understand. And here's some of those. We've got, in a lot of cases, employees that have been in a critical role for a long time. We've got processes that are not meeting current expectations or job descriptions that are old. And we need to update those for the future. We've got individuals perhaps that maybe are not performing at the same level as their peers. Are we needing to change things because we're losing credibility within the organization with our peer departments? Are there issues that we're unaware of that could be a blind spot that we need to actively go out and try to address? These are all different needs or reasons why change comes about within the job situation. And then you want to make sure that we have employees that want to choose to change their thinking without resentment or discouragement or embarrassment. So how do we help them through that change process. Largely, it is the why, defining the why and what we need from them to help the change become a reality. We want to ensure that the employees take the responsibility for the outcome. The more people that we have working on a project, sometimes that becomes diluted and responsibility isn't clear. So we need to make sure we have responsibilities clearly defined and make sure that our employees and our teams understand how we're being measured in that change process and who's going to be accountable for that. And then make sure that the company takes appropriate responsibility for the ultimate outcome. Is the company setting us up for success? Do we have the right tools? Do we have the right people in place to help make that change possible? Doesn't mean that that change is going to be difficult or easy because we've got the right people there or because we have the tools. It just means that we've got the best opportunity for success set up, and now we have to take advantage for that. So we even need to challenge the companies we work for. Are they setting us up for success for change? And if the answer is no, we need to go back to our leadership and say, this is what we need to be successful. Do not be afraid to ask for that, because oftentimes leadership will not understand all the details needed to make a vision come to life. And that's where many people that are engaged in change can help leadership understand the ins and outs of what is needed to be able to make their vision become a reality. Here's a couple of the belief systems and some of the things that get us to where we're at. What is a belief system? Does anybody know what that is?
A belief is what you think is true, but may not be factually true.
Okay. No, that's part of the answer. What else is a belief?
I would think like maybe a set of guiding principles that kind of influences our decision making day to day.
Okay, very good. Another ideas for belief. What else?
I would sometimes associate belief to be like an individuality idea.
Okay.
As far as like if I believe it and then I train it, then it's more of a belief system.
Okay, thank you.
So the definition is a belief is a mental attitude of acceptance or assent toward a proposition without the full intellectual knowledge required to guarantee its truth.
Okay, so it's the acceptance is a key word. And we talked about not having all the information, but enough to where we can accept it and move forward. Does that mean our beliefs change over time?
Yes.
That is true. It does. What influences our beliefs?
I think sometimes your experience, and your experience can make your belief system change too.
Correct. So we've got experience, we've got knowledge. What else?
Ears.
Mm-hmm. The people you associate with can impact that. Okay. I see books you read and people that you associate with in the chat. So our background in general is something that influences our belief system. And here's some of the beliefs that we've seen in healthcare. The individual customer is always right. Hospital facilities operate best when local decisions are made. I will often do what my boss asks before I even if my beliefs are not aligned with that. And my stakeholders' opinions of me are far more, very important for me professionally and personally. Many people may have these belief systems. There's nothing wrong with it. We just need to identify why in change, why we think the way we do when we're confronted with change. And a lot of it's associated with our belief system. And in category management, especially in healthcare, it's evolved very slowly and behind many other industries that are much more progressive. And a lot of this has been due to the belief system that's in healthcare. Those things are fine, but we have to understand, to help be a catalyst for change, we have to address the belief system. And our belief system can change with the introduction of new knowledge, of additional information. And that happens as you grow over time. How many of you do things the same way your parents do? Or have ever caught yourself and said, oh, my mother does that, or my dad did that, I don't know why I do that? Has that ever happened to anybody? And it's because that's environment that we grew up in, right? Some people still shopped at the same places or buy the same type of brand name, whatever, that their parents did. Some people have the same habits. Some people even use the same verbiage as their parents when they get frustrated or something like that. And so all of that comes from our background and how things have been. We've got that culture that we've grown up in, and that's totally okay. But we need to understand that we all have different backgrounds and different cultures. Therefore, we all go through change differently. So this is a time for you to reflect a little bit about how, anytime you're given an opportunity to change and address change, how does your belief system impact your ability to change, is the question that we all need to ask ourselves. All right. There's some other things that come in here, and that's how do we influence the change? How many times did you ever hear from your parents, well, I told you so, just do it? And you're not able to ask questions to help understand a little bit more about why you're being asked to do something. So we have to make sure that we do our best to shape the vision and what's in it for the people we lead. But you need to ask yourself, what's in it for me? How can I use this strength to leverage, or this change to leverage my strengths? Are questions that we can think about for ourselves. But then as a leader, we need to make sure we give direct feedback, okay? And continue to give direct feedback based on performance of how we're changing, whatever it is that we're trying to change, if it's an individual performance or if it's a new program we're rolling out within our organization or our department. And give people time to digest feedback and prepare. Now, we have to really focus on this word feedback. Feedback is a gift, but it almost always comes packaged in a very unforgiving or unpretty format. Even though it's a gift, it doesn't come all nicely wrapped in a bow. Does anybody think about a time when you've received feedback or given feedback and it comes to you all jumbled, or you couldn't articulate your words very well when you're trying to give feedback, and how that may come across to the person receiving that feedback? Oftentimes we have to sit and have a minute to digest that feedback so that we can sift through how it came to us and not focus so much on how it came to us, i.e. the emotion, but what came to us. What were the little nuggets that we can pull out of that so that we can use that feedback to help improve the process? How do we coach people, and how can we be coached? Are we coachable as individuals in areas that we need to improve, whether it's a process for the department, whether it's an individual improvement we need to do at work or within a relationship or anything like that? How coachable are we? How do we receive feedback? as individuals. These are things that we need to think about because that impacts our ability to change. And then we want to make sure that we provide that feedback in a timely fashion and be, again, as direct as you can. I had a boss that would always tell me, well, I need you to focus more on your customer service, for example. And I'd say, okay, do you have anything specific? No, I just want you to go think about it. Well, I can think about a lot of things in how I've interacted with people over the years and customer service related things, but that's not enough for me to even work from. So the more direct we can be with our feedback in helping people through change, it's going to benefit everybody. If we're very vague, you're going to leave that individual up to their own interpretation, and that may not be what you're wanting to have happen. So one of the cool things that I've done as an individual and would encourage all teams to do, in fact, I'm going to do this with my team this summer, is go through what's called Strength Finder. Has anybody ever done the Strength Finder program? It's a little book, and then you go through and answer a couple questions, and it tells you your 5 biggest strengths. Has anybody ever done that? It is fun because so oftentimes we talk about this is what you need to work on. These are the areas that you aren't good at. But it turns the tables and says, let's talk about things that you're really good at. Leveraging people's strengths because they can become change agents for us in helping us move the team through a change that needs to take place if we leverage their strengths. And so understanding a little bit about what your team's strengths are as individuals will really help you as you go through and help move the organization through change. Ask and solicit feedback. We need to make sure that we do that with compassion so it develops trust and we show empathy. I was asked to give feedback once to a supervisor, and I gave that feedback. It was honest feedback from my team about what they thought, and he blew up at me saying that he didn't want to hear that those are just negative comments and that type of information is not helpful for anybody. Now, if I would have taken that exact response he gave me back to my team never would have given him any feedback for as long as he was employed or as long as he was in that position. I didn't, but that dramatically affected my relationship with him. That told me what possibly do you think his response could have told me? If you're in my shoes, what would you think?
He didn't care to see the change and development within himself, and he was quick to think it was just negative.
Yep. What else? Anybody else have any other thoughts?
He didn't take ownership of his problems.
Okay. Good.
Trent, do you think he already kind of felt like maybe that was coming and didn't really want to hear it from somebody else?
Possibly. And like I say, this feedback comes just messy. It's kind of garbled and doesn't come packaged really well. But oftentimes we get feedback and it comes and appears to be negative, but it actually, if you sit down and sift through it, you can find very positive aspects that can be utilized. And if we don't want to hear the good with the bad, then we shouldn't ask for people's opinions. We shouldn't ask for feedback because you're actually going to do more damage than good. I never gave any feedback to this individual as long as that person was employed at Intermountain. And he was only employed maybe a year or two after that. But I never gave any feedback when he would ask because I knew he couldn't handle negative feedback. So therefore, I limited what I was really able to give to him. Did that allow us to grow as a department? No, we actually floundered because of that. because the way we receive feedback is going to be reinforce some of the beliefs and values that people have, but more importantly, it's going to reinforce the values of the company. So do the way that we respond or we receive that feedback, are they in harmony with the values of the company? It's a lot easier to lead people than to push people. Just like, the whole concept of pulling a rope versus pushing a rope. So we need to make sure that we set them up for success. So here's just some things that, on this slide that we can do to help set people up for success. Now, some of the other things that we need to do from an organizational standpoint in leadership is people need to understand, and we need to set a sense of, the sense of urgency. What is it? Make sure it gets down to the very bottom row, if you will, or the end of the row, the very bottom of the org chart or the very top of the org chart, however you want to do it. And a lot of times that is a very difficult challenge in a corporation when you're trying to lead change in a corporation for a corporation. And it's a little bit easier to do on a department level. So you have to think about how you're going to do that based on what you're trying to change and what the scope of change is. Make sure that you've got some a coalition, cross-functional people to help lead this change, and make sure that this vision and strategy is clearly advertised and people know about it. Sometimes people call that an elevator speech, or we know what we're trying to do and this is how we're going to do it. And we can say that within a 30-second elevator ride, that this is what we're trying to do. Unfortunately, I think this is where organizations fail, large organizations fail, is the sense of urgency isn't understood throughout the entire corporation. So only certain people feel that. And that really creates silos. And it almost feels like we're trying to impose or force people to do things because that communication and sense of urgency hasn't been advertised properly and is not being shared throughout the organization appropriately. So when we're involved in leading that change, we need to make sure we take these, 3 steps. Very important. And there's 3 more steps on this next slide to help us become successful. So I talked about communication and communicating the change in vision. Extremely important. Even if people can't understand the vision, if you at least can get them to understand the sketch or the framework of the vision, instead of the detail, that's better than nothing. Because in the absence of information, what do people do? What do people do if they don't have information? We can't stand not to connect dots in our head. It drives us nuts as people.
We make assumptions.
We do. And we connect and make up those dots ourselves. And I would tell suppliers, for example, we would go and we would try to reach out to somebody for 2 months, nobody ever get back, and then we'd find out, they were off for a medical issue. Well, why didn't you tell us and who to talk to? Because right now everybody else thought you didn't care about it. We were about ready to cancel the contract. Oh, we didn't know. And so it's like, if you don't give them information, people will connect the dots themselves with their own narrative. And that's dangerous. Again, eliminate barriers. That's what our job is as leaders, to help people go through that change. Sometimes easier said than done. And celebrate the short-term wins. Even if people don't think they're wins, point out the positive improvement that took place because of that. So make sure you celebrate those smaller victories, because people will start to look for them in the future. And that's what gives people hope and keeps that positive energy going towards making that change. Now, when we talk about organizational change, this is big. How long do you think it takes to change a culture in a company?
6 to 9 months.
Okay, any other thoughts?
3 years.
I guess it depends on the situation.
It can. So to change a culture in a company can take anywhere between 5 years to an entire generation. 5 to 25 years. Changing a department culture is a little bit easier because it's smaller, but when you're talking about changing and what is the new theme of healthcare, whether you're on the provider side or on the supplier side, and it's going to continue to be the theme. Mergers and acquisitions. And every time you merge with something or an acquisition takes place, you're automatically starting with a new culture. And you're going through that change. And so you think about some companies have been through 5 or 6, I'll call culture changes within a 10-year period of time, but yet their culture still isn't stable because they keep adding these new elements to it. And so that creates this long timeline to really successfully change a culture in an organization. So for some of those, that might be, your career, if it's a generation. And this is extremely important because some people have probably been through a bad culture change. And if you've been through a bad cultural change where things didn't work out, that to change that around too can also take an entire generation. So it's someone who is leading a company. Well, let's just take Boeing. Here's a good example. What happened with Boeing last week? Does anybody know?
They were
The CEO resigned.
Yeah, they got their CEO resigned and their chief of quality guy resigned. Why did they resign?
Because all the events that happened in the last 4 months with the door.
With faulty planes, right?
Right.
Their quality and their culture had changed, and they had led a change of culture at Boeing that was okay to skip steps in quality. And that was what they changed within there, all to appease stockholder dividends. It's going to take at least 20 years for that culture to change. Why is it going to take that long? Because you and I as customers are now questioning everything Boeing does. Boeing is losing business to Airbus because of this. Airbus is like, oh, we have more orders than we can even fill. Because somebody changed a culture for a period of time, 10 years, and it's going to take an entire generation for that to leave people's minds and recover from that. So we have to be very careful and understanding and be thoughtful about the change we're asking, because it can be something that impacts a generation or two, and it's not just something for today. All right, there's a couple other things to think about on the organizational change, and making sure that we understand that behaviors and processes are very important, but the bottom line to helping people through change, whether it's personal change or organizational change, is our belief system. And our belief system is structured based on our experiences, our background, and everything that influences us. And that's the beautiful thing, is we can use that to leverage our change, because we have all that diverse background we can leverage. So don't make decisions in a vacuum. You've heard that before. And that's one of the big advantages, is leveraging our diverse backgrounds and belief systems to help funnel and manage change. All right.
Can I just add something?
Please.
You talked about, thank you for the presentation, by the way. But you talked about PE firms coming in and doing mergers and acquisitions. Mm-hmm. They're driven by a timeline of 2 to maybe 5 years.
Correct.
You talk about changes lasting a multiple of that. So if their public statements are, we aren't going to be here long enough to actually implement the cultural change, it's almost impossible for those of us who have to live with that mandate to feel any inspiration and motivation. Because if I put forth, a whole bunch of effort, put in long hours, blood, sweat, and tears, literally and figuratively, only to know they're going to sell it to somebody else or shut us down because it's not profitable, whatever it happens to be, I get discouraged, and I'm like,
we all do.
Why am I here? Yeah.
Yeah. And why do we put forth that? Why do we personally invest to that? Right. So Dan Dersch will remember a meeting that he and I were in where I actually made the comment, we'll just wait another 3 years for another leader to come in and they'll change everything. Because we had gone through 3 leaders in a matter of 5 years, and they'd all changed the direction and vision. And that's what we're faced with. So I think if we understand that, then hopefully we can help. It's almost you go in survival mode when you try to develop how am I going to manage this change? But as leaders, how are we going to promote that change? And does that put us in a position to ask questions of our leaders a little bit more so that they can think about how people are going to be responding or embracing the change that they're being asked to make? The people part of a lot of what we experience in healthcare today, I'm not talking about the patient care aspect, I'm just talking more about the business aspect, is forgotten oftentimes. And without people, you cannot make change. And that's what sometimes I think, the consultants that come in and do these mergers and acquisitions forget, is that the people are what is the catalyst that make the change, not just because they put it on a spreadsheet. All right, here's just a couple other things as far as change and some of the transitions that we need to make. One of the things that we're going through we're not even through. We're past a merger. We're calling it optimization right now. But I found my team still struggling, and so I actually had them write down what their old life was like at work, just a few bullet points, and then we all together, it was a virtual event, grabbed those pieces of paper and tore them up and threw them in the garbage. What I found was we had not allowed any mourning to take place with our employees of what they had lost with the merger. And that's not fair, because everybody has to go through the grief cycle. And we also think of the grief cycle as more about when you lose a loved one or somebody you're close to, but we go through that with anything. And change, there is a grief process when we're asked to change, because we're asked to be giving up something that maybe we held very dearly, and don't understand everything that we can gain with this. So make sure you allow a grieving process for some folks to go through that mental shift. Just to give you guys an idea of what Intermountain went through. So we had pandemic. Right after we got out of the pandemic, before the government declared it officially over, we changed GPOs the next year. And then next year after that, we went into the merger. And we're still dealing with this. So for supply chain with Intermountain Healthcare, we have not had one break for the last 6 years without some immediate, constant, big change. This year, it's EMR. Next year, it's EMR and ERP. So almost in a 10-year cycle, we'll have the supply chain at Intermountain Healthcare not have one break, not one time to catch their breath without having some big move my cheese experience coming their direction. And leaders forget about that. And I've not been shy about letting our executive leadership in supply chain think about that. And remember, this is what people are dealing with. because a lot of times it's just move on to the next project. So again, projects can't be successful without people either. So it's something we have to help people understand the rate of change and the amount of change, because we also deal with something that's extremely difficult, and that is called change fatigue. Does anybody raise your hand virtually if you've not dealt with change fatigue? And if I see any hands come up, I want to talk to you after and find out how you did it. All right. Here's a couple things to think about when we're leading people through change, or when you're going through change as an individual. This is the change curve. Well, there's another, I got another diagram that looks more like a curve, but this is the state that you go through. It's really hard to deal with this neutral zone area if you're not letting people deal with a loss. It's really hard for them to understand what the new chapter will look like if they can't close the old chapter. And sometimes it'll be where we have to help people, through this. But we have to understand that they really will have everybody feels these emotions as you go through it. Some go through it a little bit quicker than others. Here's another example of that same curve. All right. So for the next 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes, whatever we've got time for here, think about these questions. I started off a little bit vague. Now let's hone this in. The last 5 years, what are big changes that you've had to deal with professionally or personally? And if the pandemic wasn't a big change for anybody, I think that was a generational defining event for a lot, at least for my kids. That's the biggest impact they've seen. So that ought to be on your list. How did you deal with it? Where are you at on the change curve with any change that you're dealing with right now? Are you still trying to close out the last chapter? Or are you in that neutral zone where everything's fuzzy? You don't know what the future is going to look like? Or are you moving over into that new chapter and understand a little bit more about what the future looks like and what your role is in the future? You may not have pure clarity, but where are you at? And are you a person that likes change? Or are you a person that will sit back and let's see how other people go through it first? Or are you one of those people that changes your living room seating arrangement every 3 weeks? All of the answers that you give yourself are correct. There's no wrong answer, because this is how you deal with change. And again, how you deal with change is structured and influenced by your belief system, your background, those other things. And so that's totally okay. But understanding and recognizing how you deal with change, I think, is the first opportunity that we have as individuals if we want to change how we deal with change. Is that a double negative? Not sure. But if we want to improve how we handle change, we have to understand first about how we deal with it right now. Here's a couple tips on the transition in helping us deal with change. I'll let you read through those, and if there's any one of these bullet points that stands out to you, let me know. Any of these bullet points resonate or stand out to anybody of an aha moment?
What do you mean by the transition deficits may complicate movement?
The deficits are the things that people see as being negatives to the change. And we all have different deficits. So that'll be unique to everybody. But ask people what they see is the disadvantage of doing this change. Especially if you're dealing with a small group or something at a department level, or it's hard to do that at a corporate level. Now, I'm always reminded of the second to last one, especially when I do home improvement projects. My new mantra for home improvement projects is double the time, double the money, and you'll never be disappointed. Because I always think I can get something done quicker and I can get it done. And it always costs me more money than I thought originally. So that's my new mantra for that one. And, that change, you might even be like painting a room or, redoing something in your house and fixing a car, something like that. It for me, that's always, it's a change because I'm trying to fix something. So I'm trying to make it better. And it generally takes longer than I think it does initially. So here's another sample of a plan that you can do. So if you're if you're confronted with a big change, here's some questions down the left-hand side in that column, and then across the row, you can ask yourself these questions, answer those questions with a question, or define what it is that you need to help you make that change more successful as an individual. So as we personally reflect on these things and the changes that we have to go through in our lives, it's really important for us to decide this last question. What will resonate most with us at an individual level? So from everything that we've talked about today, what resonates most with you? What will resonate most with you with any change that you're confronted with? And how can you use whatever resonates with you to be a tool of inspiration or, hope or direction or guidance for you to be able to lean into that change and, I don't want to say survive that change, but, work through that change, whether it's at work, whether it's personally or anything that you're confronting with. How can that help you have that courage to be steadfast as you go through that change? So with that, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to, speaking about changes, one of the changes that I would like to see, like across all the organizations here on Utah, IHC, U of U, Common Spirit, HCA, it's have a program, an education program for supply change for that starts from the ground up. What I mean is like the new hires, like the distributions clerk. I know that it's like really hard to find the right people for supply chain, and keeping it is even harder because it's always across all these organizations. The turnover, it's always been there. Also, I noticed that there's a lot to ask on the leaders of each of the organization for to support their employees. It will be a good idea if there is a coach that it can be on the middle, act as a like not as a boss, but I think that will be good in the idea of changing. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, I think you've hit on a good missing link that we've got. And one of the challenges I think that that I have uncovered just in general with supply chain is healthcare supply chain is competing with other supply chains that are more mature and have got more technology around them. And I would say some of them new shiny toys, if you will, that attract the younger generation to move into that. As I taught at various universities around the state, hardly any of them even talk about healthcare as a supply chain career. It's all manufacturing, and only now are we starting to see the services side of things, and that includes hotel and hospitality, which healthcare gets lumped into, starting to be discussed as a truly legitimate career for some of these new entrance into the supply chain market as far as employees and school graduates. So anything that anybody would like to share that resonated from what I shared with you today? Anything stick out to you?
I'll speak on something within the last slide where the first bullet point for me is something that I always have to remember is you have to end before you can begin. Just because I've had in the last 5 years off personal experience and professional, like going through a divorce during a career change after COVID. And within the 5 years of trying to battle and figure out the haziness and, find the bright light in the crowd of like, how am I going to push through? Am I good enough? Can I stay in it? Type of things like that. So I think that's always a good thing to remember for me personally, is because I have to end previous situations or not bite more than I can chew and then only give like 75% to certain things versus 100%, because I'm trying to do everything all at once and just like manage all, the running plates on the pole, if that makes sense.
Yes, totally. We have to allow that closure for ourselves, and sometimes it's so hard to do. And it's okay to mourn a loss wherever that is. Sometimes we don't give ourselves time to do that effectively, and that really impedes us to move to that new opportunity.
Trent, one of the things that stood out for me was the reminder about feedback and the importance of, personally taking that feedback and being willing to even seek it out, right? Because as you're going through that change curve, and having, like you mentioned about our mergers and acquisition efforts, right? It's often are confusing and uncertainty, but being willing to know that, hey, you're probably not going to get everything right as you're going through change, and things are going to be iterative. That feedback can be really helpful so that you know what to do the next step, because you'll get it. It's a process, right? It's always a process. And so having patience with that process, but utilizing the feedback you're given can really help. So I thought that was a great reminder.
Anybody else? We got just a few minutes left. Anybody else care to share?
I think when you mentioned on the slide that said, don't take it personal, essentially too, that's a good reminder for ourselves. But then when we are talking to other people, to also be mindful of how we're giving them feedback and how we would take that. Because it's like, do unto others as you would have done unto you. It's like, that also includes feedback where it's like, if you are too vague, like you mentioned, how would you read into that? Would you be staying up all night thinking about that discussion? Would it have been clear? And so just really focusing on that, because even if you aren't their supervisor, it's just a fellow colleague that you're discussing things with on what you both need to work on. It's just trying to be kind, but be clear on what needs to happen.
Yeah, it's been really easy to hide behind our devices. And sometimes that creates a barrier for us to think in thinking about how we're actually delivering that feedback or even that communication, and how it still is a personal communication, but yet we've got all this technology that kind of is that medium in between. Well, I appreciate, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for me, encapsulating a couple different things, right? Timing, external challenges that may not relate to, the change within the professional setting, whoever it was that was going through the divorce, a variety of things. It could be your cat died that morning and somebody's giving you feedback and you're like, okay, I'm giving you good feedback. I had a plan. So for me, it's have a plan and understand that, all plans need to be adjusted based on, life. But you could have the best plan. You've teed everything up and the cat died that morning and the person's just not listening to you or taking it well. It's not what you did that was wrong. It was just sometimes bad luck. So
timing.
The timing and don't necessarily give up on your message and just accept, okay, something else is going on. I'll find a better time to have this feedback or discussion about change or whatever it happens to be. So for me, it's have a plan, but understand that a plan is, only as good as a plan, right? It's just the theory.
Yeah, you bring up a good point is it's oftentimes we have to repackage our vision if people don't understand that and repackage it so they can understand it better. And oftentimes that happens with how we give feedback or even feedback we get. We can repackage that at a later time to be more effective too. Well, I think we're running close to our hour and appreciate everybody's comments. It was a great opportunity to be with you today. So we'll turn it back to you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Trent. Really appreciate a very thought-provoking presentation.